This is Virginia Dize. I'm co-director of the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center, and I'm going to be speaking about driver safety and transition as the keys to independent living. This slide has a lot of statistics on it, but they're all really important because they really tell the story of why this is important. Older people often outlive their ability to drive, but not everyone does. Women usually by 10 years and men by about 7 years. That's typically because older women tend to be a little bit more ready to give up driving, but that may change over time with this current generation of older adults. In addition, and the statistics in the second bullet are kind of old, but they're the only ones we've got. They're based on a study that was done in 2004, and they indicate that older adults who stop driving take 15% fewer trips to the doctor, 59% fewer shopping trips, and 65% fewer trips to spend time with family, to engage in social activities, religious activities, or anything else that they enjoy doing. Half of older non-drivers don't leave their homes on any given day. It's also true that 3.6 million Americans miss or delay non-emergency medical care because of the lack of transportation. And significantly, only 10% of the whole Medicaid population uses NEMT, or non-emergency medical transportation. This represents only about 1% of total Medicaid spending, so not much in comparison with other services. And also significantly, 78% of family caregivers do transportation. They either provide it directly or they arrange it for their loved ones. Now, this slide talks about what may be available, but is certainly not necessarily available in every community in terms of community transportation options. And you'll see right at the top, we start with driving and walking and biking, which are ways that people get around independently. In addition, there is the NEMT program, the non-emergency medical transportation. Medical transportation is the most frequently, commonly requested type of transportation assistance that people come to the elder care locator about, which receives a huge number of calls about transportation. That is the #1 reason why people call elder care locator, even though they can call about Medicare, Medicaid, home and community-based services, any number of issues, yet transportation leads the group. In addition, importantly, there's public transit. Now, public transit is certainly not available universally in every town and borough of this country, but where it's available, it may be a fixed route, or it could be, and this is very true in rural areas, a dial-a-ride service where you have to reserve the ride, but it does pick you up at your home and drops you at your specific destination, in contrast to fixed route, which follows a fixed route, and you have to get to a designated stop. There's also paratransit, which is offered as an alternative and an accompaniment of public transit. It's offered within 3/4 miles of a public transit route, typically the fixed route. It also has to be arranged ahead of time and scheduled, and there is usually a copay, just as there is in public transit. There's also a number of different shared ride options. Increasingly, we talk about Uber and Lyft as being something that has enabled people to travel, particularly in urban and suburban areas. There are taxis, but again, taxis are not universally available, and many towns and cities may have very limited choices in these areas. In addition, there may be transportation voucher programs, which offer people a voucher, a discount, if you will, for using any number of different kinds of transportation. And finally, there are volunteer driver programs, and we often, when we talk about transportation for older adults and people with disabilities, we think of volunteer driver programs as being the backbone of those services. They supplement whatever may be available. Typically, they may be targeted to provide just medical rides, or they could be providing assisted transportation, whereby someone assists someone, the rider, in and out of a car. So these are typical choices. They may be called by different things in your community, but nevertheless, this is pretty well the broad range of transportation. The red items that are bulleted on this slide are also part of community transportation. They include information and assistance, because it's critically important for someone who needs transportation to know where they can go in their community to find out about transportation options and to receive assistance to make the right choice for them. There are also one-call, one-click transportation resource centers. Often these are operated out of public transit agencies, but they may be operated by other types of organizations. And those two services, that one-call, one-click, as well as the information and referral services, are the critical access points for finding out about transportation in the community. The last two bullet items are travel training and mobility management, and I'm going to talk about those in a little bit. On this slide are the 5 A's of passenger-friendly transportation. This list was originally developed by Helen Kirshner, and I think it's a good access point, if you will, a good way of kind of looking at transportation overall and thinking about whether or not it's truly meeting the needs of older adults and people with disabilities in the community. It includes the availability of transportation. Is there transportation at all? What is it? Is the transportation that's available acceptable to people? And here you run into issues such as public transit may be available, but it may not be acceptable to some people because they don't know where it runs. It doesn't go from near where they live to where they need to go, those kinds of things. Accessibility of transportation, and we know that wheelchair accessibility is a big issue, but when you're talking about many people with physical disabilities as well as older adults, accessibility may not require wheelchair access, but may still require a lower step to get onto a bus, for example. Things that make transportation readily accessible. This also speaks to the issue of whether or not it's easy to find out about transportation options in the community. Adaptability is really important because it basically means that transportation can be geared to the needs of individuals. Is it something that has sufficient flexibility? Is there flexibility in the route, for example? Is there responsiveness in the community by those people who are planning transportation and creating programs so that in response to complaints or concerns that are expressed by people living in the community, that transportation can be adapted to better meet their needs? And finally, and perhaps most importantly, is it something that's affordable? Are discounts available? Does some program offer the option of being able to get a ride at no cost because your income is below a certain level? Now, when there are concerns about driving, and driving, as those of you who are listening to this know very well, driving is the major way we get around in this country. And many older adults really cling to their keys because they represent their ability to continue being part of the community, to continue having control over their lives. But older adults sometimes have concerns about their driving. They may be doing some self-monitoring of their driving and no longer drive at night, no longer take left turns, for example. But if you have concerns, if older adults have concerns, there are some things that they should be doing, such as checking in with family and friends about their driving, getting regular eye exams and health checkups, having their driving skills evaluated by someone who is a driver specialist, taking a driving refresher course, such as that offered by AARP or the local automobile club, and exploring transportation options before driving is no longer a safe option. I think it's really awful when people are driving one day and tomorrow or today they're no longer driving, and then what do they do? So it's really important to be checking around in the community and to encourage older adults, to encourage all of us to look at the different options that are available in the community that we can use as an alternative to driving that actually may be more convenient on many occasions. So this slide lists a number of resources that can be helpful to someone when they have driving concerns or when a family member or a friend has concerns about someone else's driving. The American Occupational Therapy Association Driver Rehabilitation Specialists can be an important resource. They're not available everywhere, but Aileen Schul-Davis is going to be making a presentation later in this course, and hopefully she'll be able to fill in the blanks and provide lots of good information about the services that they provide. There's also the AARP driver safety course, and NADTC will be publishing a blog later in the month of June about the AARP driver safety course and some of the resources that AARP offers. CarFit personal vehicle assessment, when you look at the list of supplemental reading that's part of this course, you will see a reference to that and a document that you can access to find out more. And finally, folks who are very critical and can be very helpful with regard to this issue, mobility managers and travel trainers, and I'm going to be talking about that in just a second. So mobility managers. A mobility manager, as I'm sure many of you on the phone during taking this course know, can assist an individual or a family to identify their transportation needs and find the right options to meet those needs. They are critically important. They can be called different things. They may be called transportation specialists, travel counselors, information specialists. They may work in a number of different kinds of settings: public transit, aging and disability resource centers, area agencies on aging, centers for independent living. Look around your community, see if there is a mobility manager, because that person can really be a critical resource to help folks find what they need, to help them be introduced to the different kinds of options that are available, and equally important to that, to figure out whether or not the services that are available are going to meet their needs. So travel training. Travel training was originally created to help people with disabilities use public transit. And over time, it has evolved quite a bit, but mostly travel training is about helping people ride the bus. It does teach critical skills that support independent travel that enables people to stay connected to their community. Travel training can include a number of different items, and the way in which travel training is offered, the particular travel training model that's used, is going to vary a little bit, but it can include an assessment of needs and identifying individual goals. And it's really important when people are thinking about taking travel training that they kind of know what's the end that we have in mind. What do we want to be able to do? Do we want to be able to ride the bus to live our lives more freely and more easily? Is there a particular destination that we want to go to? Just what is the goal? It can be, the training actually can be offered one-on-one or in a classroom setting. And again, it depends on the program as to what style of instruction is offered. And it can include one or more travel experiences. That can be an individual trip that a person would take with their instructor. It can be a group trip to a particular place that's meant to be a pleasant place that folks haven't been able to go to recently, such as to an art exhibit or downtown to have lunch. So getting introduced to not just how it works, but actually traveling and using the service can really make people more confident as independent riders. Travel trainers may be professionals, they may be certified travel instructors, or they may be volunteers, and those volunteers typically are trained very well. The travel training course may be offered through a transit agency, or it can be provided by a number of human services agencies, such as Centers for Independent Living, area agencies on aging, community action agencies. Now, peer travel trainers, sometimes called bus buddies, work well for older adults and people with disabilities. So in that kind of model, an individual who is older may be paired with an older, experienced bus rider. And that can really ease the transition and make people a little bit more confident in their travel. And one thing to remember is that just because you give people travel training doesn't necessarily mean that they immediately leap into becoming regular daily or weekly riders. So an important measure of success for travel training is whether or not the people who are trained actually use the system. This slide is meant to just kind of lay out this whole issue of transportation as both a personal and community concern. I know that the people who are taking this course are professionals who work in human services programs and transportation and do other kinds of related work where transportation is a critically important issue. And we tend to think about transportation as being something that we teach our clients about, that we ensure that they have the information and support that they need to travel successfully. So there are a number of questions here that are meant to be questions that an individual might ask themselves. Who provides information about transportation? What options are available? How much does it cost? Are there programs available to pay some or all of the cost? Is help available to guide an individual to help them make the right choice of transportation? And what if they've had a bad experience? Is there some place that they can contact to get a remedy so that they don't just stop riding, that they try to find a solution and let folks know that they've had a bad experience. But organizations also that work with older adults and people with disabilities need to know about transportation, whether they're transportation professionals or not, because transportation, and I'm sure that you all know this again, undergirds all the services and supports that we provide that are intended to enable people to live and thrive in their communities. So understanding why transportation is critical just in general and in your community, what transportation services are available. You don't have to be an expert, but what you do need to know is, if you don't know everything about transportation, who does? Are there any gaps in service? And as professionals in the field who work with folks around maybe healthcare services or home and community-based services, chances are you've identified those gaps. Well, are you getting those gaps, that information, to the people who live and breathe transportation every day? Again, that issue about who has the information about transportation, who provides transportation services, and what can you do to improve transportation for your clients? Is it a question of helping them understand that, yes, they do indeed need to let someone know when they're going to need a ride next week. They don't need to wait until the last minute to make that reservation. That's just one example of the kinds of ways that you can support individuals to take better advantage of the services that are available. It's really advisable if people are, especially at this point where they're transitioning from driving, that they start to think about making a transportation plan. Judy Bonilla, who is an advocate in this area, is going to be doing a presentation in this course that is really focused on transportation planning at the individual level. But this slide is meant to just kind of raise your awareness on this important issue. As part of the planning, again, this is a repetition of what has been said earlier. What options are available? What's the cost? Will this service work for me? Just having 10 different transportation programs in your community doesn't necessarily mean that you have immediately found services that will work for you. Will it work? How will it work? Who is your personal transportation support network? Unfortunately, some people don't have one, but for others, they are using family members, friends, neighbors, acquaintances to help them get around now. So just because you're going to think about using formal services doesn't mean that your personal transportation support network goes away. It's meant to be part of that whole. And where do I go now? How do I get there? Is there an alternative way to get there? So even an older adult or a person with a disability that may be worsening over time, thinking about, okay, I'm still driving, I'm still able to get from point A to point B. Are there things that I could explore? Are there ways that I can get around? And it's very important to understand that with transportation, it takes a lot more than a ride. Arranging transportation for people with chronic care needs can still fall apart at the last minute. People don't feel well enough to go to that doctor's appointment that they made 3 weeks ago. These things happen. So it's important to explore all the aspects about traveling, including whether people need help to get in and out of their houses. Listed on this slide are a number of additional resources. These are resources that are available on the NADTC website. They're also part of the supplemental reading list that you'll have access to in this course. And finally, that's my contact information. Thank you very much.